glad to have you back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. Now, the Buhari administration, which began on May 29, promised to stamp out insecurity and corruption and then evolve a viral economy that would create massive employment. 30 days after, there's yet to be pronouncements with regards forming a cabinet, but the president plans to constitute a National Economic Council today. While the opposition party, the PDP, says 30 days of Buhari's administration has been more of, quote, motion without movement, unquote. But President Buhari says the audience stable is being cleaned now and it requires scrupulous and painstaking planning. End of quote. Dr. Biodun Adedipe, an economist, is in the studio with me to talk about this. Good morning, Dr. Adedipe. Thank you so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure, and thanks for having me.
So it's 30 days now since this new administration has been in the saddle. What do you think of the first 30 days of President Buhari's administration?
Well, we start by putting it in perspective that talking about the administration is not so much as the presidency, but looking at the totality of the government in terms of presidency, the National Assembly, and of course, the judiciary. Now, if we put it in that perspective, the question to ask is, why are we where we are 30 days after, and why are not where we expect to be, and if we're moving the direction we all expect as economic actors? Now, ideally, 30 days after, the president should have his ministerial team in place. Okay, so we don't have a team yet. And it is very crucial when it comes to not only economic assessment, but also forming expectations. Now, one major issue there is that once you see the cabinet, you get an idea of who the major players there are. And there's this thing we call the significant utterances of key government functionaries as a major issue in projecting forward. Even dealing with the major macroeconomic indices, talking about interest rate, exchange rate, inflation rate, job creation, and the rest of it. Now, what we can talk about today is largely tied to whatever is happening in the stock market. And the reason I say that is this. That is one market that reacts to whatever decisions or developments are within either the government itself or those reacting to what the government is doing. So that is what we can take so far. So even though I would say that, yes, to some extent we haven't seen any action, but more because of the failures in the National Assembly. That's my take of it. And they must also recognize that as leaders, they are responsible for this economy and not think that all that matters is the politics they play. That what they do has very grave implications for the interpretation economic actors we put to this. Yes, as economists, we can talk about all kinds of, factors that drive movements in exchange rate, interest rate, and all of these, external reserves and all. But the bottom line of it is that what they do there determines what we expect. And that is what we play out in the economy. So,
Dr. Adedipe, we now have the president going to constitute a National Economic Council today. Right. Will that not kind of change the game somehow? Because he's run the economy. Most people say he's run the economy just fine with the permanent secretaries for those ministries. There has not been so many issues. Keeping it tight, keeping it in. So 30 days after, he's making his first real move with regards, appointments and all the rest. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the National Economic Council, I presume, basically is about the state governors and having the vice president as their chairman. So in my own mind, that is just constitutional. What is even more fundamental is economic management team, which you cannot talk about now until you actually see his team of ministers and advisors. So yes, what he's going to do today is good for the books, because the governors are already in office anyway. So whether we like it or not, it's just a matter of inaugurating them for, let me say, formalizing the process. So that will not make any major change. But the critical thing here is when he has his team. But let me take it a little bit beyond that. Now, when you look at how it runs now, as you remarked, the president runs now largely with the permanent secretaries in the various ministries. Now, what it means essentially is that those to implement policies are in place, but the idea of ministers being there is to give direction and leadership. And that is very critical. Now, take, for example, what we just finished discussing. The statement issued by the central bank last week, Friday.
No, last week, Tuesday.
Last week, Tuesday, sorry. Now, 41 items for which you cannot buy FX from the central bank. Now, what it simply means, and this is where I differ a bit from, BJ Riwani, and that's the fact that this does not mean that there is a ban on the importation of those items. What it means is that you are free to buy them, but please go and source whatever foreign currency you require from the roadside, not from the central bank. That to me is a significant policy direction indicated, at least from the central bank. Now, in my interpretation of it, I will also take it as perhaps this also indicates the direction that the Buhari administration wants to go in managing the economy. Which is to say that, look, this economy can only grow if we put our basic focus on job creation. And the question we ask is this: the man who imports rice, how many jobs will he create as compared to the man that processes rice cultivated and grown locally here? If you ask me as an economist, with my tight focus on job creation, I'll prefer the man who cultivates rice here, processes, and puts it in the market for the consumer. Now, the other side to it is this, that if we also look at it from the perspective of, does it mean that we are short in terms of reserves? Yes, we all know that the facts are there in the open market. We have less than 4 months, about 4 months of reserves to pay our import bills, which means that the reserves we have now today, if we don't have any accretion to it, will last us only 4 months. We know that that is below the minimum threshold recommended for maintaining stability of the exchange value of your currency, because that is 6 months. So, but the question to ask ourselves is, the country today in the world with the largest external reserves, which is China, close to $4 trillion, they still ban importation of some items. For example, in China, you can't import a car and hope that you just license it and put it on the roads. They wait for you at the licensing office. They won't even issue you a license. So yes, you spent your money importing the car, but you can't use it. Why won't you be able to use it? They are not saying you can't use it, but you get to the licensing point and they deny you a license for the car. So that's a strong message. And I think there's a need for us to begin to see how this economy will move beyond where we are now. Because where we are, there was something I shared also recently at the central bank. And that is what happened to Malaysia in 1990, which is an issue we must think about seriously. Now, in the case of Malaysia, in managing its foreign exchange, the reserves and the exchange value of its currency, the prime minister then took a position that the central bank governor deferred from. So he resigned. The finance minister at the time in Malaysia also deferred with the prime minister. He resigned. His deputy also deferred with the prime minister's position. He resigned. Now, the World Bank, IMF also disagreed with him. But 10 years later, the IMF issued a document that said that was a very strategic move made by Malaysia and that the economy is better for it today. Anytime you check on the competitiveness index, you discover that the improvement in Malaysia in the last 15 years has been quite significant. So we must ask ourselves questions. Do we want to continue managing our economy the same way? Just in the same manner we talk about subsidy everywhere. Now, the big question is this: does subsidy really exist? Is this subsidy we should be talking about, or the fraud in subsidy? Now, these are the issues. So now, if this government will have its clear direction as to we want to re-energize this economy, there are tough choices we have to make.
So what are those tough choices that, of course, he knows most of them already. That's beginning
right.
to fight corruption, plug the leakages, close up the loopholes, and the rest of it to ensure that, we keep what is ours within. But in the next, 70 days now, we'll be talking about 100 days in office. Yes. What should he really be doing?
Well, for me, I would say priority should be number one, which I believe is also thinking about. You need to reduce significantly the number of presidential aides. That's very, very key. That's a major, major source of leakage. Then, secondly, you need to also begin to do something about the power situation. That is critical. Now, that may not even require a minister to be in the office before you start that. Just call a meeting of those discos. Who are their leaders? Tell them what you expect of them. And, of course, they are private investors. They want to make money. So all you need to do is connect the money they make with the power they deliver. That will change the game. Now, move on from there, and the issue of corruption also. Now, corruption is not so difficult to deal with. We make it appear that it's so hard to deal with. You can't steal money in the public space alone. Somebody somewhere will know about it. So if we get the evidence, so where now, what else do we need? The courage and the will to go after those who are corrupt.
Well,
and of course, the institutions are there to do that.
Definitely. We're going to keep our eye on this administration for the next 70 days or so. But thank you so much, Dr. Adedipe, for coming on the program this morning and sharing your perspectives with us.
It's my pleasure.
And that's it on Business Morning for today. Many thanks for spending time with us. I'm Harriet Agbenyi. Have a profitable day.